When you think about it, making a role-playing game based on the Mario series seems like a silly idea that shouldn't work. RPGs are based around strategy, long-term thinking, complex attack typing and status effects, and stat management, and Mario games are based on movement-intensive platforming and heavy execution. They seem too different to make a game that combines them both work, and yet Nintendo has successfully done so multiple times since 1996. From the Square-developed Super Mario RPG to Alpha Dream's Mario & Luigi series, Mario RPGs have been one of the most well-known and beloved Mario spin-offs of all time. And in celebration of its 20th anniversary, I'm going to look at perhaps the most famous Mario RPG series, Paper Mario. This series has undergone multiple transformations over its lifetime, going from a fairly traditional role-playing system to exploring different gameplay styles, with the more recent games deviating heavily from the originals. It's a series that isn't afraid to experiment in delivering a unique Mario experience, but has also developed an identity crisis because of it, alongside a fan base that will ravenously defend or criticize each entry based on what they think a Paper Mario game should be. Throughout the year, I'll be taking a look at all 6 games in the Paper Mario series: the original N64 game, the Thousand Year Door, Super Paper Mario, Sticker Star, Color Splash, and the Origami King. And if you're wondering about Paper Jam, well, that's a Mario & Luigi game and won't be covered here, but trust me, I'll get to that series at some point. We're beginning with the 2001 N64 classic Paper Mario, but first I want to state my feelings about the series up front, and I think it's important to do this because the direction it's taken is a hot point of contention among fans. As of this video, the only Paper Mario games I've beaten are the original, Thousand Year Door, and Super Paper Mario. I've played Sticker Star, but remember very little about it. I haven't touched Color Splash at all, and I've only played the first hour or so of Origami King. You'll probably think that I'm biased towards the formula of the first 2 games because of that, and maybe I am, but anyone who watches my videos regularly knows that I treat every subject I cover, no matter what I think of it personally, with respect and fairness. I'm not afraid to call out Paper Mario or TTYD's shortcomings just because they're the popular kids, and similarly, I'm not going to blindly dump on the later games just because they're common punching bags. I know some fans get very vocal when discussing these games, so I want to make my intentions clear up front and promote balanced discussion rather than just fall into rabid defense of the old and criticism of the new. With that said, let's get this retrospective started with the one that brought Nintendo's platforming hero Juggernaut into a whole new dimension. This is Paper Mario. In 1996, Nintendo released Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars, a role-playing game developed by Square for the Super Nintendo. This was Mario's first foray into RPGs, and it combined several elements of the Super Mario series with classic RPG battle and exploration mechanics. The game was a critical and commercial success, and even to this day, it's hailed as one of the finest Mario games ever produced, and in the late 90s, demand for a sequel was rampant. At Space World 1997, Nintendo announced that a game tentatively titled Super Mario RPG 2 would be launching for the Nintendo 64 disk drive. The company had asked Square if they would develop the game, but as you probably already know, they were in the process of switching focus to the PlayStation to create their next big project, Final Fantasy VII. Instead, Nintendo turned to Intelligent Systems, who were well known at the time for the Fire Emblem series and would go on to develop the WarioWare and Advance Wars franchises to create the game. The name was changed from Super Mario RPG 2 to Mario Story, though when it was brought over to North America, it was localized as Paper Mario. From the outset, Intelligent Systems and chief director on the project Ryota Kawade wanted to distance themselves from Super Mario RPG and create something original, both in gameplay and aesthetics. Rather than go with either the pre-rendered sprite style of SMRPG or a polygonal style that was possible on the new system, art director Naohiko Aoyama went with a visual style inspired by arts and crafts. Characters and objects were represented by 2D sprites that would flip around in a 3D space to reveal that they were paper thin, which helped make the graphics distinct from its predecessor. Special care was given to the battle system to ensure that it wasn't too automated to keep players who weren't dedicated RPG fans from getting bored, nor too difficult or too easy to frustrate or placate the players. Paper Mario was released in Japan on August 11, 2000, and would later come to North America on February 5, 2001, and then to PAL territories on October 5th of the same year. Critics highlighted the game's art and combination of RPG and platforming gameplay, and in the years following, it continued to receive praise from fans, but now that the game is 20 years old, does it still hold up? Let's get the Paper Mario retrospective started and find out. Paper Mario begins with the introduction of the Star Rod, a magical staff used to grant the wishes of the residents of the Mushroom Kingdom, currently under the care of the Star Spirits living in Star Haven. However, Bowser and his minion Kammy Koopa steal the Star Rod and kidnap the 7 Star Spirits, leaving Star Haven in disarray. Meanwhile, Mario and Luigi receive a letter from Princess Peach inviting them to a party at her castle, where they meet residents of various towns and areas of the Mushroom Kingdom, and eventually Mario walks off on his own to meet the princess in private. Peach and Mario begin to enjoy some quiet time together when suddenly the castle is lifted into the sky by a mysterious force, revealed to be a secret underground fortress built by Bowser. The Koopa King suddenly shows up to kidnap Peach and take Mario down, and as they fight, Bowser pulls out the Star Rod and makes himself invincible, knocking Mario unconscious and sending him out the window. Thankfully, he survives thanks to the lingering power of the Star Spirits who direct him to Shooting Star Summit, and he is then discovered by a family of Goombas living in Goomba Village who help nurse him back to health. Mario heads off accompanied by Goombario, a young Goomba who idolizes Mario, and when they get to the summit, they see visions of the Star Spirits. They tell Mario that he must rescue all of them so they can take the power of the Star Rod away from Bowser, and thus Mario sets off on his journey to save the Star Spirits and defeat Bowser once again. Paper Mario's gameplay combines elements from both the RPG genre and Mario's platforming adventures, taking tropes from the two and melding them together into a unique package. The overworld exploration plays like a 3D platformer, as Mario can move and jump around as you expect him to, though the acrobatics and movement of titles like Mario 64 and Sunshine are absent. Instead, motion is purposefully stiffer, and the fixed camera angles help narrow your view to only see the important items and level geometry. It's not as free-flowing as the core Mario platformers, which makes sense as it isn't the focus, and as such the platforming challenges are very simple. Besides running and jumping, the only other movement option is the spin dash, and no, it's not that spin dash, though like that one, it makes Mario move slightly faster horizontally. It locks you into a specific angle and can be sluggish to use if you aren't jumping out of the spin, but if you equip the Speedy Spin badge to increase its speed, it becomes a great tool for getting around areas quickly. Besides the platforming, the overworld sections are chiefly there to house the various settings, characters, encounters, and puzzles. When standing next to an NPC or interactable object, you can perform context-specific actions like talking to a character to learn about the area you're in, placing an item down, or moving something around the room. This, combined with using your hammer to destroy or shake objects and the abilities of your partners, is also how you'll solve the game's puzzles. Like most RPGs, these puzzles rely less on physical dexterity, aside from the platforming, and more on picking up on details and patterns, and while most are simple enough to solve at a glance, considering the target audience of this game, I think they're appropriately difficult. Though on that note, one thing that's very inconsistent with Paper Mario is how much direction you're given, both in solving puzzles and knowing where you need to go next. Some puzzles will blatantly tell you what the answer is, and some won't, and while you're told of your next destination most of the time, some sections towards the end just leave you with no indication as to where to go next unless you pay the fortune teller Merlin to give you a hint. Most areas contain enemies that roam around the map, and similarly to Super Mario RPG, touching their sprite will start a battle. If you hurt an enemy in the field, you'll gain a first strike, which lets Mario make an attack before the fight begins, but enemies can also first strike you if they touch you during an attack animation. In combat, you can choose either Mario or his partner to lead the attack, though Mario will always be in front during the defense phase. Mario has 3 main attack types: his jump, where he jumps on enemies, his hammer, where he whacks them with his hammer, and special moves, which uses the power of the Star Spirits to perform unique attacks, apply status effects, or restore some of Mario's health. At the end of the prologue, the player gains access to action commands, letting him boost attack power by pressing buttons on the controller, just like the timed hits mechanic in SMRPG. Each attack has its own action command. For instance, pressing A as you jump on an enemy gets you an extra bounce, while holding left and letting go at the right time with the hammer grants a more powerful smash. In addition, the guard action command lets you reduce the amount of damage Mario takes if you press A just before an enemy or object hits you. The action commands are simple to understand, but a bit hard to master, as it's all about timing, and it's a good thing that they were implemented because otherwise the battles would be frustratingly boring. In any other turn-based RPG, even if fundamentally you just choose attacks from a menu and watch them play out, the battles are still interesting because the moves are flashy and the damage values are massive. Paper Mario's moves are not very visually exciting, and you rarely see moves deal damage above the single-digit range. At least with action commands, it involves the player in the battle more and lets them feel in control of the combat. Keep in mind that part of the primary audience here is kids who might not be ready for a full-blown battle system, so making it feel more like a traditional Mario game and not relying so much on strategy is intentional. Not that there isn't any strategy involved, because there are advantages and disadvantages to each attack and scenarios where each is required. Jumping hurts enemies over a period of attacks. If your jump attack power is 1, for example, then you'll only deal 1 damage per jump, and any enemy with a defense level of 1 or higher won't be hurt at all. By contrast, the hammer delivers all of its damage at once, making it great for getting past defenses, but it can't reach airborne enemies without the proper techniques. Speaking of which, Mario and his partners can use a number of advanced moves that produce different results with an attack, like additional power, hitting multiple enemies at once, or producing a status effect if successful. These moves require flower points to use though, and it can be very easy to drain them quickly if you're not careful. Flower points, or FP, are one of the 3 stats you need to keep in mind during combat, the others being health points, or HP, which obviously represent how long Mario has before he dies, and star power, or SP, which is required to use special moves. Your partners don't have health of their own, but if they're attacked directly and you don't guard, they can be unable to attack temporarily. That's the basic mechanics of combat, and it's certainly a battle system that emphasizes simplicity over in-depth tactics, but despite that, the game has a few systems that help spice things up. First, Mario can collect and use items that perform different functions, usually either healing HP or FP, attacking enemies or administering a status effect on them, or giving a buff to Mario. They're essentially one-use moves that can sometimes be very powerful, and since they cost no FP to deploy, it's helpful to keep them around, although you can only carry 10 items with you at all times. Thankfully, key items don't take up an item slot, and every shop features a check system that lets you store up to 32 items and retrieve them whenever you want, even if you're not in the shop you originally stored it in. This is a great addition because you may find a healing item early in the game that restores way too much HP or FP for your current level, so you can put it away until later on when they would be less wasteful. Badges are another type of item you can find in the world, and they give Mario access to new moves or alter his stats when equipped. Putting them on requires badge points, but they allow for some seriously great upgrades that can almost wildly change the dynamic of combat. Some of my favorites include Power Bounce, which lets you jump on a monster indefinitely if you time your action commands right, and Happy Heart and Happy Flower, which occasionally restore a point of HP or FP. And of course, you can't forget the partners, Mario's companions that form the party that travels alongside you on your quest. Mario always has one active partner at a time, and they'll walk beside you on the overworld and assist Mario in battles, although their help is limited. While traveling, each partner has their own skill that helps Mario solve puzzles or collect items, such as Kooper using his shell to hit or grab things from far away, or Lady Bow turning Mario invisible and incorporeal. During encounters, every partner has their own attacks as well as strengths and weaknesses that make them more adept at a situation than others. Partners can't use items or special moves, and unless you equip the Group Focus badge to allow them to recharge SP, occasionally the best strategy for a partner is to do nothing, effectively wasting half your turn. You can switch between party members at will, though doing so in combat uses their turn unless you have the Quick Change badge, but do yourself a favor and look up how to get it, because I guarantee you'll never figure out how to unlock it on your own. I didn't even get it for this playthrough. Despite their weaker combat potential, some of them can still be a great help both in the overworld and while fighting enemies, and others have entertaining personalities that make them enjoyable to keep around. Your first partner is Goombario, a young Goomba boy whose only real personality trait is that he's excited to be on an adventure with Mario. This guy's very much a partner for beginners, as his Tattle ability gives you information about enemies and bosses, as well as locations and NPCs outside of battle, which is great for newcomers. His other attacks just can't compare to the rest of your partner's arsenal, however, as his head bonk and multi-bonk act no differently than Mario's jump and multi-bounce moves, and while he can charge his attack power, I find this never comes in handy that much. Kooper is a much better companion, even if his personality is just as flat and uninteresting, despite his snazzy scarf. Not only is his attack more powerful, but he can hurt multiple enemies if they're on the ground, making him well equipped to deal with threats. He has his limitations, as he's useless against airborne enemies, but Kooper is definitely a mainstay in my party, and I don't know why, but I always get a kick out of using his shell toss ability to grab faraway items. My favorite partner has to be Bombette, who can attack with either a body slam or by bombing her target, which can include one enemy, all ground enemies, or all enemies in the battle after she gets upgraded. Her attacks are strong as hell, and she makes quick work of most enemies, though her major downside is that her bombing move requires a lot of FP. And I guess her overworld bomb ability isn't very good, as while it opens up new areas, it's way too unwieldy to use for first strikes, but her combat capabilities more than make up for it, and I'm a fan of her personality. Parakarry has a more unique design since he's not just a Parakoopa, he's a Parakoopa mailman who's apparently not very good at his job, which is a simple backstory, but it works, and I really dig his outfit. Sadly, his abilities are fairly lacking, as while his skydive and shell shot are great for aerial enemies, he's otherwise pretty mediocre, and the rest of his attacks don't make up for it in my opinion. Not to mention his overworld move where he carries Mario for a short distance, which is useful in getting across gaps but is also so painfully slow. Some partners aren't very helpful except for specific scenarios, and Lady Bow is a prime example. Her smack and fan smack attacks deal multiple smaller hits like Mario's jump, and while they can attack any enemy regardless of where they are, she isn't very useful against foes with any kind of defense. But her out of sight move, which makes Mario invulnerable to enemy attacks for one turn, is great for enemies that deal out a lot of damage, and even though it wastes 2 of Bow's turns, letting Mario dodge damage completely more than makes up for it. Watt is my second favorite party member because not only does her base attack pierce defenses, but she can paralyze enemies and boost Mario's power, making her an excellent offensive counterpoint. She isn't able to damage more than one enemy at a time, but her Electro Dash and Turbocharge moves are fantastic against bosses. Plus, her overworld ability lights up dark areas and can reveal hidden blocks, which actually makes it worth using her in the field outside of just in instances where it's required. I was actually surprised that I got as much use out of Sushi as I did, especially considering her swim ability in the overworld is unremarkable and doesn't control very well. But in combat, her belly flop and squirt moves are solid attacks for single enemies, and her tidal wave is magnificent for clearing out a large group, even if it causes the game to lag a lot. She can also use Water Block to boost Mario's defense temporarily, which is a neat idea, but I rarely ever found it beneficial. Finally, there's Lackluster, who has kind of a neat design but ultimately lives up to his name, as he is indeed very lackluster. It's not that his moves are bad, I did manage to find some use out of his Spiny Surge move to toss Spinies at enemies, and his Cloud 9 ability to increase Mario's evasion, and hell, seeing Mario ride around Lackluster in the overworld is pretty great. But for how late in the game you get him, he suffers from a lack of raw power without any other sufficient capabilities to make up for it, leading to an underwhelming final partner. Defeating an enemy earns you star points, the game's experience points, and earning 100 levels Mario up and increases either his HP, FP, or BP. As you'd expect, stronger enemies give you more points, but if your level is too high, the amount they give you is reduced and can even go to 0. It's also possible to level up your partners, though in order to do this, you need to find one of the super blocks hidden in the world. These let you increase the rank of your partner, initially to their super rank and eventually their ultra rank after you get the Ultra Stone in Chapter 5. Ranking up your partner increases their base attack power and gives them a new move, but super blocks aren't common, so you need to determine who to upgrade first, which might change based on your playstyle. I personally like upgrading Kooper, Bombette, Watt, and Sushi as early as possible. However, Mario doesn't gain any offensive or defensive boosts when he levels up. The only way to do that is to find upgrades to Mario's boots to increase his jump power and his hammer to increase his hammer power. You need to find these in order to beat the game, as they're required to solve specific puzzles, but it's nice that these plot essential upgrades also have functions in battle and aren't just keys to open specific doors. With all of this in mind, I can say that 20 years later, Paper Mario's battle system does a good job mixing the intricacies of standard RPG battle systems with a Mario-like flair that's easy to comprehend. It starts out painfully slow, but the action commands help make what is otherwise unengaging combat something that has its own charm. I don't consider it the best Mario RPG combat, and Thousand Year Door refines the fighting to make it even better, but for the first entry in the Paper Mario series, I'm glad that it holds up as well as it does. And that goes for the aesthetics as well, because Paper Mario looks and sounds very good for the system it was designed for. True to its name, the game goes for an arts and crafts graphics style, with 3D environments sometimes looking like they're constructed out of materials like paper and cardboard. Later games in the series will really emphasize this style and make it a core mechanic rather than just a visual style, but in this game, honestly, the paper part of Paper Mario feels a bit lacking, and the sprite work just makes the characters look like 2D actors in a 3D environment. I don't fault the game for this though, because the artists and designers were working with early 3D hardware, and it doesn't ruin the graphical quality at all because the game still looks really nice. The character sprites are mostly spot on, capturing the spirit of the creatures they're based on while also adding a character's unique traits and personality, and I'm also a fan of Mario and Luigi's design, which is admittedly simple, but delightful in its own way. Not every sprite is fantastic. I find Princess Peach's eyes a little disturbing and lifeless if I'm being honest, but overall there's a lot to love in the character design and artwork. The environments are very appealing as well, with a bright color palette and simple but effective architecture that just screams Mario to me. The soundtrack by Fire Emblem composer Yuka Tsujiyoko is something I'm more mixed on, as there's many qualities I like and some that I don't. For the most part, the compositions are good, alternating between cheerful and bright melodies and more moody and darker tunes. I think my major issue is the instruments and sound font, which in my mind weaken the music overall rather than enhance it. Many instruments sound just a little too soft to me, and as such, the music sometimes lacks the punch it needs to get you invested in an area. When it works though, it definitely works, because some of these songs are absolutely phenomenal, and perfectly capture the atmosphere of the locations and situations that they accompany. And let's not forget the battle theme, which is such an awesome melody. The main battle theme is something I always pay attention to in an RPG, because not only will you be hearing it a lot, but to me it speaks volumes about the game's personality and direction, and this one hits all the right marks. It might still be my favorite of the series, but Origami Kings may be on the verge of replacing it. I'll let you know when I cover that game. Anyway, let's finally explore Paper Mario's main story and talk about the various locations you travel through. Every main area is accessed from Toad Town, the central hub of the game that features several NPCs, buildings, and services, and I love this place. Not only is the music super good, but there's something about the small town feel and cozy atmosphere that just appeals to me. I feel that way about a lot of towns and villages in RPGs actually, probably because I grew up in a very rural community, so the small town vibe just clicks with me much more than a sprawling city does. And Toad Town has such a cheery and calm mood that I can't help but fall in love with it, though I do wish the town was laid out a bit better. Toad Town is built like a backwards C with no easy way to get from one end to the other, meaning that if you're at the entrance of town and you need to get to the docks, you have to go all the way through the town. The rest of the game is separated into chapters where Mario travels to a new location on the map, meets some interesting characters, and eventually saves a star spirit from the region's boss. Mario's first destination is the Koopa Brothers Fortress, but before he can get there, he has to travel to the town of Koopa Village, which is currently under attack by a group of fuzzies. This is how Mario meets Kooper, and after getting his shell back for him, he tags along as the player begins the infiltration of the fortress. This is a very simple dungeon, but there are some pretty good set pieces, such as the fake block, which you see being built and know that it's a trap, but once you realize there's no other way to progress, you figure you might as well see what it does, and lo and behold, it's how you move onwards. I also love how Bombette could have escaped from her cell at any time by blowing up the cracked wall, but since she was so angry at being captured, she was too mad to think of that, which is a great character moment. Chapter 2 sends Mario off via train to get to Dry Dry Desert, first passing through Mount Rugged and meeting Parakarry, who joins you after you recover some letters that he dropped across the mountain. This chapter introduces a problem that will become a notable issue through the series, the backtracking. Paper Mario levels are constructed as linear hallways with occasional branching paths, and sometimes you need to head back and forth between locations to progress, and this adds up to a lot of empty walking. You can eliminate some backtracking if you know what to do, but first-time players won't have this luxury, especially when Chapter 2 features a desert consisting of a grid of rooms that all look the same with different features. It's easy to get lost here, though thankfully the Dry Dry Ruins dungeon is enjoyable, especially the boss Tootin' Koopa, who can be a challenge with his chain chomps and magic attacks if you're not careful. After returning to Toad Town, Mario encounters a Boo butler named Bootler, what else would it be called really, who asks him to accompany him to Boo Manor past the Forever Forest, beginning Chapter 3. This forest is a seemingly endless maze where the only way to progress is to identify the correct path based on changes in the scenery, kicking you back to the start of the forest if you go the wrong way. The Boos at Boo Manor have taken the Star Spirit from an invincible monster named Tubba Blubba, but will only relinquish it to Mario if he defeats Tubba, which you can do by traveling to his mansion, grabbing a key, and using it to get to his disembodied heart. Chapter 3 is very varied in terms of its location and current objective, and yet the pacing never feels like it's going too fast or too slow, instead hitting the right balance between all its elements to put everything together nicely. The same can't be said for Chapter 4, which not only contains more egregious backtracking, but also goes at too fast a pace to really leave a lasting impact, at least for me. When you return to town, a bunch of Shy Guys are causing havoc, stealing valuable items and taking them to Shy Guy's Toy Box, a playtime-themed miniature world that exists within an empty house in Toad Town. This world is built around a circular train track containing 4 stations, and opening them up requires that you find a relevant item in the toy box, go back to Toad Town to give the item to an NPC, and return to the toy box to move on. The chapter doesn't take too long to complete because the toy box is fairly small, but because you're going back and forth between it and Toad Town, it doesn't have the opportunity to shine on its own. Chapter 5 takes place on Lava Lava Island, which contains a village of Yoshis, and this is where the game starts ramping up its difficulty, especially in Mount Lava Lava, which is the only area where I died in my playthrough. This chapter covers the biggest amount of land so far, featuring basically an entire island, including the inside of a volcano. Mount Lava Lava itself is pretty huge, but again, there's never a point where you get lost because the map is designed to show you the correct path, so the only real obstacle is the encounters. Hunting for the baby Yoshis is also pretty fun because, again, the map is designed in a way that guides you smoothly through each room. The absolute worst chapter has to be the 6th one, where Mario and company travels to Flower Fields. First of all, in order to unlock the door to this place, you need to talk to 4 Bubulbs hidden in various chapters. The ones in Toad Town, Mount Rugged, and Lava Lava Island are easy enough to find, but I can see the one in Forever Forest stumping players because it's not immediately obvious that you can go to the center of each screen. Flower Fields itself consists of multiple long paths that connect to a central room, with the essential items hidden at the end of each one, and in between progressing the chapter's story is just a bunch of walking. It's slow, it's repetitive, and it makes this chapter an absolute slog to get through, and the boss Hufflepuff is just the cap on the awfulness because of his gimmick of spawning smaller cloud enemies every time he gets hurt. At least Chapter 7 is better, as both of its major elements, a penguin murder mystery and the Crystal Palace, work very well. When Mario gets to Shiver City and meets the Bumpties, he is suspected of murder after he finds the mayor lying motionless on the floor, and honestly, I love the concept that Mario is accused of a horrible crime like murder. Then you have the Crystal Palace, which is certainly the most puzzle-heavy area as it features rooms with mirrors and alternate versions of rooms. It's not super difficult to figure out, but I appreciate how this dungeon focuses more on being cryptic rather than being tough, and the Duplighost gags are absolutely perfect. Beating all the chapters allows you to move on to the end game, but before we finish the main story, I do want to touch on the game's side content. The biggest side quest is to hunt for the star pieces, these little crystals that you can trade to Merlot on Shooting Star Summit for unique badges. Some of these are incredible, like Peekaboo, which basically eliminates the need to tattle, and Pretty Lucky, which causes enemies to sometimes miss, so saving up star pieces to get these things is well worth your time. This is the only actual use for star pieces, which is unfortunate because half of the badges Merlot can sell you don't help at all or are ones I don't find useful, so there's no real point in looking for all of the pieces. But how can you get star pieces? Well, many are located in the overworld, either hiding behind objects or placed under panels which require a boot or hammer upgrade to open. Others are rewards for completing side quests, such as the letter delivery where you help Parakarry give mail to their intended recipients, doing favors for the old grumpy Koopa named Koopa Koot, and my personal favorite, participating in the Chuck Quizmo quizzes. Every once in a while, you'll randomly come across this funky-looking worm named Chuck Quizmo, who challenges you to answer trivia in exchange for a star piece, and while most of the questions are easy if you're paying attention, some of them can throw you for a loop. There's also the Toad Town Dojo, where you battle fighters in progressively difficult encounters to eventually master the combat, as well as Taste Tea, a toad who can cook dishes for you based on the items you give her, which gives you some pretty nice healing options. Mario can also check in on Luigi by heading back to their house, and talking to him shows that he resents not being able to go on your adventure. You can even read Luigi's diary where he writes not only about his jealousy, but also references other Mario series and even foreshadows Luigi's Mansion, which was in development at the same time as Paper Mario and would release in the same year with the launch of the GameCube. I do like seeing Luigi try to hide his disdain over being sidelined by Mario and his crew, and trust me, this isn't the only time we'll be seeing him in these games, and he's always a treat to see. While there's not a ton of side content to do, I genuinely like these quests because the things you're doing, delivering letters, joining a fight club, answering quiz questions, are all varied and fun. I didn't even mention activities like the Little Oink Farm, where Mario can spawn and collect little oinks of various colors to earn prizes based on which little oink you spawn, very similar to a gacha machine, or the Toad Town Playroom, where you can gamble your coins to play 2 different minigames to earn even more money. Little time wasters like this might not bring much to the overall game and don't impact the story, but I imagine a lot of players back in the day would spend a lot of time on these activities, especially the Little Oink Farm. Plus, these pigs are adorable and I love them so much. Anyway, when you finally bring the 7 Star Spirits back to Shooting Star Summit, they bring you up to Star Haven, where Mario prepares for his final assault on Bowser's stronghold to rescue Princess Peach. I haven't talked about Peach yet, but in the interludes between the chapters, the player takes control of her inside her castle, trying to find a way to escape with the help of a young Star Spirit named Twink. The point of these segments is to tell the player where they're supposed to go next, as Peach and Twink discover clues as to the location of the next Star Spirit, which is a nice, organic method of guiding the player. But there's also some fun moments here, like the fact that a couple of Bowser's minions have set up a game show and just let Peach participate instead of recapturing her, and having to bake a cake by following specific instructions in order to appease Gourmet Guy. It's little scenes like this, which are prevalent throughout the game and become a sort of staple of the series, that really emphasize the comedic and lighthearted nature these games often put to the forefront. Later games in the series, the next 2 especially, will bring in more darker moments, but it's important to remember that the core of Paper Mario is a whimsical, jaunty experience. But enough stalling, let's finally talk about the end of the game. Bowser's Castle is a long dungeon, and fitting for a final area, every room either contains a puzzle that requires a lot of thinking, or challenging battles holding the toughest enemies yet. What I really like is how navigating around and solving puzzles requires the use of multiple partners, rather than the rest of the game where partner switching was typically kept to a minimum. It's also strangely eerie seeing the empty halls of Peach's castle once you finally reach it, and it sets up the finale perfectly. You've seen these rooms before during the Peach segments, but they were still occupied by enemies, and there's something much more threatening about seeing an empty castle, especially when you juxtapose it against the castle party from the beginning. Setting up a Paper Mario tradition, the final boss fight with Bowser has 3 stages. First, a round where Mario takes a few pot shots at the villain before they turn invincible. Second, a round where the heroes break the boss's invincibility through the power of plot, in this case Princess Peach helping Twink to realize his potential. And third, the actual boss battle phase. This is a magnificent final boss, because not only does Bowser have the most health of anything you've seen so far, he also has very powerful attacks, the potential to poison you to deal constant damage, and the ability to heal himself if his health is low enough. It transforms the battle into an endurance match, as Bowser can erase some of your progress very quickly, so keeping on the offensive and knowing when to restore your health or buff your attack is critical. Admittedly, it can sometimes feel like it's just a war of attrition, but eventually you start to break through his defenses and dwindle his health down to 0, taking us to the ending. Now that Bowser's been defeated, Mario takes the Star Rod from him and returns it to the Star Spirits, allowing them to protect Peach's castle as Bowser's flying fortress begins to crumble. The Star Spirits put Peach's castle back into its original spot and ascend back to Star Haven to help grant people's wishes once again. After some time, Mario and Luigi are hanging out at home when they're once again invited to a party at Peach's castle, and Mario's partners, who have all gone their separate ways, are invited as well. At the castle, Mario can speak to the NPCs he's encountered throughout the game, and Peach thanks him and his crew for saving the day. We're then treated to a lovely parade sequence with floats made by the characters representing the places they live in, and the game ends with a wonderful shot of Mario and Peach watching a fireworks display at night. It's a very gentle ending after a pretty epic climax, and it's surprisingly effective in how calm this ending screen makes you feel. And really, it's the perfect way to cap off a delightfully fun and entertaining RPG like Paper Mario. It is rough around the edges at times, and there are admittedly some poor design choices that make aspects of the game hard to swallow, but on the whole, Paper Mario holds up fairly well. The battle system is almost too simple at first, but gradually introduces mechanics that manage to hold your interest long enough to get to the finale, and while not every chapter is fun, the adventure is still a good time. I played this game as a kid, but I have much more nostalgia for its sequel, so it was a bit hard for me to go backwards to this entry and judge it for what it is, but doing so made me appreciate it as the game that started a lot of traditions that continued into the rest of the series. There's a concept in games that I like to call first syndrome, which happens when the first game in a series is looked down upon or ignored because later ones improve the gameplay or use more modern technology. Paper Mario suffers from this a little bit, but overall it is still mostly the classic Mario RPG that people remember it as. It would not be the last, however, because this marked only the first step in the Paper Mario series, and the journey ahead will take us to many new places, some grander, some flimsy, and some downright disappointing. Buckle in, ladies and gentlemen, because this retrospective is just getting started.